We're live, as you notice. I'm wearing an OG Speed Secrets. It's it's starting to come apart. It's been a while since we've made shirts. This was probably one of the original ones, but I like it. It's comfy. Tonight we're going to talk about a couple of things. One is the video that I just put up on how to make a good turbo combo. What goes into making a good turbo combo? And as you might imagine, everybody here on the live feed is certainly going to be able to answer this. Well, you start out with a good NA combination, and in the case of an LS, you start out with just something that has a cam and springs in it, and leave all the other things alone, and you add boost to it, and then you're going to do very well. Obviously, you have to have the right injector size and fuel pump size to supply the new power output. You should always use an intercooler, run as much octane as you can, E85 if possible. All that's good. But as you saw in the video, if you guys haven't taken a look at it, please go take a look at it. If you haven't taken a look at it, what I did was went out of my way to essentially completely ruin a perfectly good combination. Because if you, and especially the case on a 4.8, if you're testing a 4.8, you want to leave the long runner intake manifold on there. You want to leave the cylinder heads that are on there that were designed for that bore size, and especially for that displacement. The 706 heads I'm talking about, you want to put a mild camshaft in. And in my opinion, even the good cam that we use, the stage 2 turbo cam, was too big of a cam for that 4.8, but it worked okay with that combination. But we tried running a blower and the other combination, the wrong combination, the wrong cam combination. I should have my shirt on. I should say wrong combo, a wrong com, yeah. So we ran a short runner intake on the 4.8. We ran a 317 head, low compression, also good. And we ran a positive displacement blower cam, wide LSA, just not, none of those are a good choice for that. And it showed. It made a lot less power NA, as I showed, and then made a lot less power under boost, run at the same boost level. And the point of that really was to not just show those two things, because we ran them both NA, and you saw there's a big difference in power, and they ran them both with boost, and there's an even bigger difference in power because of the amount of power difference is kind of multiplied under boost. And you could see that what I really wanted people to get out of this is that I wanted them to extrapolate. I wanted them to go take this to the next level. Obviously, one of these is a turbo cam, one of them is not a turbo cam. They're essentially both turbo cams. We ran boost on both of them, and you can run boost on both of them. And boost just multiplies whatever is there. And that's really the whole thing behind this test. That is that no matter what we start with, we can start with a stock motor. We can start with something that's just completely wrong in every way, shape, or form. The wrong intake, the wrong camshaft, the wrong cylinder head. And yet, if you add boost to it, it's going to multiply what's there. Now, in the case of that combination, it wasn't because we had the wrong cam timing that won't work with boost. We know that it will. We have run it with a blower. It works fine with the blower. We've run it NA. We've also run it now with a turbo. So all of those cams will actually work with those kinds of forced induction. It's just that that particular camshaft was bigger than that 4.8 needed, and it had the wrong valve events on it and a really wide LSA, which tends to push power higher in the rev range. So if you have a high RPM cam on your NA motor, guess what's going to happen under boost? It's going to be a high RPM camshaft under boost. So it's just a bad combination, but it does multiply the same. If you start with less power and you multiply, you just end up getting less power. If you start off with more power and you multiply, you end up getting more power. And that's what this is all about. So regardless of which camshaft you put in there, if you put in a mild camshaft and multiply it, that's going to be good. Put in a medium-sized cam or a big cam and multiply it, all that's going to be good. It's just going to do, you're just going to have more of whatever your NA power curve is. And that's the whole thing behind the video that I just put up. If you haven't taken a look, please go take a look. But what I wanted to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the poll up already. We're going to get going on the poll. And that is there loss associated with driving a turbo? Is there power loss Is there a power loss associated with driving a turbo? And that's going to be the poll. And I'm going to read you an email that I got, which is just awesome. I love when people send stuff like this that gives me ideas to talk about, a subject matter to talk about for the live feed, because we want to just like spread more information out there. So I'm going to go ahead and read you the email, and I want you guys to chime in and let me know what you think. So this was sent to me by one of the viewers, and he said he's suggesting an experiment that I do, because he wants to, essentially what he wants to do is demonstrate what the power losses are associated with driving a turbo. We know that we can do that with a blower, and the easiest way actually is just to put the blower on a blower dyno and we could directly measure it. Or you could run the blower up on the motor, have it go into the good way is to have it go into another motor, and then this motor, we can see how much power it makes by driving the blower, and the blower is actually producing boost into another motor. Or you can put a restriction on it and make it produce the boost, but it has to have a combination of the boost and the flow and the RPM, because that's going to determine what the power loss is associated with driving that supercharger under real world condition. But on a turbo, it's more difficult. But let me read you what the recommendation was for this experiment. So take a turbo application on a dyno, then run it again without boost, so run it NA, but simulating the load that it would create to build boost. So he wants to do what we were talking about with a blower. He wants to create a restriction coming out of the turbo to simulate the boost. Create a restriction on the compressor side of the turbo that would simulate the amount of air that could be flowed through all 8 cylinders, head, intake, runners, throttle body, whatever the points of restriction may be. I believe this would demonstrate how much power your NA motor actually makes real world before boost, and it would be interesting to see the power difference under boost when compared NA and the exhaust side only. I agree wholeheartedly. I agree that's why when we run, that's why I always try to run the motor NA and then run it turbocharge, at least so that we can know what our starting point was. That unfortunately doesn't tell us what the loss is associated with driving the turbo, even though that's going to be considerably less than it would be driving a supercharger. We have lots of supercharger data. I have a bunch of stuff from Kenny Bell because they've run stuff directly on their blower dyno, so we know what those losses are. Also, as I said, on a blower, you could simulate that. I've run one before on a motor just open, which that doesn't simulate anything. That's maximum flow of the blower at whatever engine speed that is, and that's never done in the real world. The only way that you could do that would be as if you had a combination where the motor was so efficient that it could utilize all of the airflow supplied by the blower at every RPM. Now, matching a motor to that kind of thing on a centrifugal blower would be a real chore. So you'd never be able to simulate what happened there. So that's not obviously the one thing that it did do, I can tell you, is when this was on a Vortec and we were aiming the Vortec, kind of across the dyno, and it did want to open up all the drawers in the box. It wanted to push the motor over. It was thrusting the motor and the dyno. So it's just not a good situation, and obviously not an accurate test. But if you were to regulate it and have it create boost, then it might be more of an example. As I said, the ideal situation, and I think the ideal situation for this turbo thing would be the same way, is that when I've witnessed SAE testing of this, they do it with 2 motors. So they have one motor spinning the turbo up and have the boost blowing into the other motor, so they can actually measure the power output of the one motor under boost, but without the benefit of the boost. The problem with that, again, and I pointed this out, is that if you were to do that, the problem is that because you're not boosting the motor, you don't have the same amount of exhaust flow. So the turbo is a cyclical thing. So the motor is not putting out the power output that it would under boost. So it doesn't have the exhaust flow. So it's it's much harder situation on the turbo side to get a genuine, to record a genuine power consumption number for the turbo. So he goes on to say, NA guys say that they want all the power all the time. Turbo guys say they would rather wait for the boost and never get into boost. Everyone talks about superchargers being run off the engine. I don't know that everyone realizes that turbos also have parasitic loss associated. Technically, I don't think it's parasitic loss, but as it takes some mechanical force to create the boost, it might also be cool to measure the back pressure between the exhaust manifold and the turbine. Yeah, we've measured back pressure both before and after the turbo. I think it's a cool thought experiment. Maybe you could apply it to a real world test. I don't know what we would learn, anything practical or useful, but it'd be cool to see. And I agree that this is an excellent suggestion, and I'm glad that you suggested it. And now we can discuss the difficulty in that, and we've discussed it a little bit. And that's that to figure out what the losses are actually with a turbo, the motor has to be subjected to boost, because it has to be subjected to the pressure and flow to generate the exhaust flow. And maybe doing it with the 2 motors might be a way to do that. But again, I don't know a place that has a lot of dynos that are right next to each other where we could do something like that. I have seen them in video, but I've never been to a place that has that. I tried to convince the guys at Westech to allow me to run a big tube from one dyno to the other, but it's a fairly extensive length, and obviously that would have an effect on things. I just thought it would be kind of cool to run the 20-foot tube, or however far away the 2 dyno cells are away from each other, and the doors would have to be open, and so it's a whole thing. But it would be kind of cool, and we could do that on the I was going to do it on a blower situation, probably not a turbo deal, and they would have to have 2 controllers in there working both motors and run at the same RPM and yada yada yada. It would be kind of cool, but we know from the way that I look at it is that we know from the power gain that we get relative to the pressure that we see. So if we run 20 pounds from a blower and 20 pounds from a turbo, we know that we get a lot more power from the 20 pounds from the turbo. Some of that, you might argue, could be the efficiency of the compressor itself. The centrifugal supercharger probably is going to be a little closer because the impeller is going to be similar in design to a turbo. It's not going to be spinning as fast. Usually they're bigger because they don't spin as fast. Some of them can be up in the 100,000 RPM range. Most of them are not. Most of them are more like 50 or 60,000 RPM. So you have that positive displacement blower, completely different. The RPM level for a rotor pack is much, much lower, 20,000 RPM or less. And they're much bigger and much heavier, but in their defense, they move a lot more airflow for every single revolution as compared to the impeller of a turbo or a centrifugal supercharger. But we know that there are dramatic losses associated with driving these blowers, different rates of loss in the design of the blowers. So it matters which one we're picking. If we pick a centrifugal supercharger, the losses may be less than if we pick a roots blower and we're spinning it up really fast, and or a twin screw. We've seen numbers that exceed 300 horsepower when driving roots blowers really, really hard and really, really fast. The example everybody uses are top fuel motors, and to spin the blowers that they use on top fuel motors, it might be double or triple that. So it'd be a lot. So it takes power to make power, and it does on the turbo. But because we get so much more power at a given boost level from the turbo than we do from the blower, we know that the losses from the turbo are dramatically less. I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue that fact. I know guys like to say, oh, but it's transferring heat from the exhaust to the intake and yada, yada, yada. And yet whenever we test turbos, they tend to have better charge temperatures than the other superchargers do, even before the intercooler. So the turbos work very well. And in every test that I've done, when I've compared, I have a couple of videos up where I've compared this directly. So we've run a turbo and or turbos. We've run centrifugal blowers, roots blowers, twin screw blowers. I've never run like an axial flow, like a Latham, or a G ladder blow. You know, there are other kinds of designs. I haven't run those, but the 4 major ones I have run and directly compared them at the same boost, the same airfield, the same timing. And we've demonstrated, for me, I knew going in which one was going to make the most power. It's obvious that the turbos will make more power per pound of boost than any of those other forms. And it's by a lot. I mean, the power differences were quite a bit. They could be 100 or 150 horsepower. Because as I said, the drive losses for some of these blowers can be that kind of number. So we're going to see that kind of number. Also, the turbos, like I said, tend to be a little bit more efficient. So I have videos up where we've run those comparisons on a modular Ford. I ran a similar 3-blower comparison both on a Honda B Series and on a 5-liter Mustang, a 331 stroker, I think 327 or 331, with similar kinds of things. What I was interested in showing more than just the absolute power differences is I wanted to show what the boost difference was, the boost response. Roots blowers do one thing, twin screw blowers do something, centrifugal blowers do another thing, and turbos obviously do something else too. And the great thing, and I pointed this out many times in the video and in the stories that I wrote originally where we did all this testing for, that I wanted to point out that the great thing is that we have all of these choices. If we only had one thing, then we'd all have the same thing. And if we just had one thing, the world would not be as good a place. It is a better place because we have these kinds of choices. And I would pick different versions of the forced induction for specific needs, for different applications. I wouldn't choose turbos for everything. Even if they make more power, that wouldn't be what I would want for every application. For my truck, I would pick a roots blower for that. If I could put forced induction on there and it had enough transmission to take it, I would put a roots blower on there because it's immediate boost response. I would like to combine that, if I could, in an ideal world, with very good intercooling with the 85 and with a long runner intake manifold, and then some kind of mild Truck Norris-esque camshaft. That would be ideal. And it would be an aluminum 5.3, which would be perfect. But a lot of times all of that can't package very well. And then I love the Vortec that I had on my Mustang. Ran a centrifugal supercharger, ran the Silver State. It was fantastic, and I thought it was the cat's meow, and until I drove a 5-liter that had I actually rode in a 5-liter that had a turbo on it. I'm like, oh yeah, this feels a lot different. I thought that my Vortec was everything, because compared to an NA motor, it really is. It made a lot of power. It showed big gains, but then the turbo showed lots of gains, and it did it a lot earlier than the Vortec was. So it was an interesting thing. So the test method would be the best test method would be for a turbo would be the dual engine thing, I think. So let's see what you guys think, and let's see how our poll is doing. Is there a power loss associated with driving a turbo? Wow, it's split a lot more than I thought. So 54% are saying no and 46% are saying yes. I think it's an absolute thing. I think you'd have to say there has to be some, but it's probably not very much. Could you put a turbo on a flow bench to see how much flow it takes to get it to boost pressure? Yeah, except that it's not just flow that spins that. It's also heat energy. You'll only have back pressure under boost, and you'll only have the right amount of back pressure if you have the exhaust flow that goes along with whatever power level you are producing and the intending exhaust flow under that power level. Just put 10 PSI restriction on the exhaust and see how much power it loses. But that's not what's happening. That's not a test. Use a turbo to reproduce the same boost and compare the power output. Let's see. Didn't someone use large air tanks to produce boosts in drag racing? The compressed air supercharging company has already done that. They tested that at Westec. Use compressed air to replicate the boost supply. The problem is compressed air is very, very cold and very, very efficient. And so that's actually not a good test. Todd, you did 10-pound hits on your truck today. Do you have the timing right and the air fuel right? Is it all working out? I haven't heard from you for a while. Power Nation ran 2 engines on a single dyno. They hooked 2 of them together. Did they chain them together? How did they hook them together? +1 for the Epic Dyno Tube. I think it would be awesome. The Boost Caboose was not the success that I was hoping for. Really cool idea though, but they just didn't have the blower speed versus engine speed optimized. Why not take the charge pipe off? Because then you're not giving boost into the motor and it's not seeing the exhaust flow. Turbo is easy. Take one of your S475 4/8 on 10 pounds. Use a 1 AR and a 1.6 AR at the same RPM. Back pressure and horsepower will be different. Compare them. That's not going to give us what we need. That's going to give us a turbo comparison. Dan, you're 14 minutes late. You have to stay after school. I think if the cold side wasn't hooked up, then I think the hot side would definitely restrict it in some fashion. And I guess it adds weight. If you had a street strip 2-valve 4.6 with a Vortec S trim, that Vortec is spelled with a CH. Vortec S trim with a T56, what would you look for in a cam? I would put a small one if it was mine. I would put the 262 comp 4.6 2-valve cam, the PI version. No. You could get the test motor and run it at 2,500 RPM with no load. Actually aspirated, supercharged, and positive displacement supercharged to see the power difference. We know what the power difference is running an NA motor and a roots blower and a turbo motor, if that's what you're talking about. But driving turbo with a big shot back, yeah, that's not going to be enough. Big turbo do you need on a 2JZ to make 950 horsepower? You want to run a race gas. I know nothing about E85. Probably one of the Garretts. It could be smaller than on a 2J. It could be smaller than like a VS Racing 7875. You probably could do it with a 72 millimeter, maybe. The litmus test. You're testing the pH balance. Cool, Todd. I'm glad to hear it's running good. He's getting beat in the other room. He's very, very loud when he plays his when he's gaming. Turbo dyno with turbo cold side going to nothing but a bleed off, retaining 10 psi pressure on it, then turbo without a turbo. Now that's a perfect test, but if you can replicate it a bit down low. I got that set up. I have a stage 2 comp cam. Mercedes-AMG is working on electric assist turbocharger to eliminate lag. That is kind of cool. I think that the Formula One guys were doing that, right? Find a turbo and an electric supercharger that both use the same compressor. Test them at the same boost level. Rewatched your X5 cam on the Gladiator video today. Did anybody watch I saw that the Engine Masters video is up on YouTube where Freiberger did the 871 roots blower on the, I think it's a 555 big block, where they made 1,500 horsepower because they ran E85 and nitrous and a blower and all that stuff. Although I didn't see the tunnel ram on it when they did that. Tim, happy to help, man. Crash every single 1996 Grand Sport Chevy made, and then some Gran Turismo. Thought I heard a Sasquatch attack. I'd like to know what that sounds like. How's our poll doing? 56 no and 44 yes that there's power loss. Have you ever tested a leaf blower? No, but the way back before any of the YouTube guys were doing it, a guy brought one over to the show shop. His was electric. He just plugged it in, and they ran it on the chassis dyno. And it made a little bit of boost at lower engine speeds before and we told them, we said, look at the airflow of that blower. I said, and then look at the airflow, calculate that versus the airflow of the motor this was an SHO Taurus motor at 6,000 RPM or 6,500 RPM. I said, it's just not going to even be able to support the airflow of the motor naturally aspirated, let alone make any boost. Oh no, it's a blower. It's going to be a blower. I said, just watch what happens. And it did make a little bit down low, but then it just ran out. And then you would need a couple of them. And I think that when later on, when Freiberger and those guys did it, I think that they did it with gas powered ones. I made progress. I put my turbo on a workbench. Keeper reminded me to install it on the truck. But sometimes if you like drop it on your foot or whatever. You live and die for Kathy Lee. Yeah, V6. This was at the show shop, so they had lots of SHO Tauruses then. Australia is in the house. Home of the Ford Barra. Would running the same force induction on different motors give any indication of power? We've done that a lot. I have lots of stuff to choose from, but the only way to do it, like I said, would be to do two motors, one feeding the other. Is there ever a circumstance where a turbo engine increases fuel miles per gallon to maintain a given power output? I don't know what that circumstance would be, because normally when you're running boost versus running naturally aspirated, you're a lot of times running a lot richer mixture and generally less timing. So that tends to make the brake specific fuel consumption go up. So I don't know where a crossover would be where that would be beneficial. Todd, I do notice that during my hits, I'm going lean in the 16.5 to 17.5 area. You should not be driving your truck like that. That's going to blow up. 16 to 1 is terrible. It needs to be 11.5 to 1. You have a problem with fuel supply or the tune or something. Todd, don't do that. It's going to blow up. How to size fuel injectors on a 2JZ. You're going to need, instead of times 16, it's going to be times 12. So you're wanting 1,000 horsepower. So you're going to need, I would put like 1,200s or 1,500 cc injectors in it. Have you ever done any dyno tests with a Mazda Duratec motor or the Ford Duratec? I haven't. On the chassis dyno way back at the show shop, they did a bunch of those because they were making 3-liter versions of the SVT Contour. So they're taking the SVT Contour top end and removing the 2.5 liter and then putting a 3-liter stroker version under the Contour stuff. And then they were porting the heads and porting the intake, and I think extrude honing the intake. So they were making pretty good power. I don't remember what the chassis dyno numbers were back in the day. Diesel turbos are more efficient and better mile per gallon. The fuel mileage that diesel is getting has less to do with boost than the turbo and more to do with having an open throttle. 16 to 1. Yeah, that's bad. Richard, will 4V Boss Cobra Jet header flanges work on 2V heads? I don't know. I don't know if there's if the flange is different on a Cleveland head or not. And bigger tubes over smaller openings is normally the way that headers work anyway, so I wouldn't be worried about that. I just don't know about the bolt pattern and the spread. Yeah, that's not a little lean. A little lean is it's 11.8 instead of 11.5. A lot lean is that it's multiple. It shouldn't ever even be idled with no load at 17 to 1. It should misfire. Is there a V8 turbo kit that can be bought and modified so I don't have to start completely from scratch? A big block Buick 455? No, but I just made my own. I just used the stock exhaust manifolds and then just all of it. It's not anything elaborate. It's just a Y pipe, which I don't know if you're going to find any 455s though. If you find a single exhaust 455 in a full size car, that has basically the turbo kit. You just need to route the exhaust back up to a turbo somewhere. But it's pretty easy to do. Savage, I have a 2000 Mustang GT, so that's a 4.6 valve. It came to Australia, I believe, with a Series 1 Celine M90 supercharger kit already installed. Should I ditch it for a small turbo? The M90 is going to be pretty restrictive for a 4.6 valve V8. A turbo will make a lot more power. I got target 12.6 wide open throttle on my NA302. 14.6 cruise and idle and stuff. Yeah, that's fine. On an NA motor, that's fine. But he has a turbo LS. So what power do you recommend aftermarket damper? I don't know. I don't have a recommendation for that. I don't know what that number is. We tend to put them on dedicated builds where we care about the internal components. I don't often use them on junkyard motors. Sometimes we will if I'm having to do like on an LS, if we're having to do a blower, I'll put an ATI who makes excellent stuff. I'll put an ATI on there because we need the drive for some sort of roots blower or Whipple or whatever it is. I will do that, but on if we're doing a dedicated build with forged rods and forged pistons and all that stuff, I usually put an aftermarket damper on it. Would an electric turbo need to be variable speed to ramp up with RPM to make it work? Yes, it couldn't be a fixed RPM. A little late, but I just had a thought with trying to do this turbo dyno test. Could you have the turbo unplugged, cold side, and use an electric turbo to provide the boost? That might work if you had enough of an electric turbo to do it. Some say that 12.5 to 12.8 is okay under boost. It's not going to last very long like that, though, at wide open throttle. The things that you can get away with, like on a drag race run, are different than the things that you get away with, like at Bonneville or even worse, a Silver State run where you're at wide open throttle for 30 minutes. It's got to be fairly safe. We saw some wide open throttle, like extended RPM and load testing. And the problem is, once the thing got into misfire or detonation, it was hard to get it to stop. Even adding fuel and throwing and taking timing away, you had to breathe the motor and then get back on it. And when you did that, the detonation went away. But you could richen it up even like 9-to-1. You just throw fuel at it, and the detonation didn't seem to want to go away. How far are LT direct injected engines from a diesel conversion? I don't know what the rail pressure is on a direct injected gas motor, but they certainly don't have the static compression that a diesel does. Y pipe size for a Subaru would not be the same as for an LS motor. No, it's a much smaller motor. Recommendation for a turn oil pump on a remote mount. I don't know, honestly. The only remote mounts that I've done, what did we do? Oh, I made it so that the remote mount still kept the turbo near the motor and just ran the oil back down, because I looped the pipe on it. And when I did do a remote mount or a low mount turbo, they sent me, I think I did a Hellion kit way back on the Coyote, and they sent me whatever pump they used with their kit. So I don't have a lot of experience with using those pumps. Can you recommend AFR for cruising and light load? 14.7 is fine under cruise. That's normally what OEMs will cruise at. They'll cruise near stoic. The Honda would go to 19-to-1 under cruise, but it has, because it's running lean burn. Yeah, James, 22 degrees, 12-to-1, 93. How much boost was that? It's a hard nose. I have a Ford Barra Turbo 6. That's good. And I love the V8 supercharger wine on the Mustang. Turbo kits with a full exhaust fit in the engine bay. I don't know. It's going to be a tight fit. Bring back the Richard argues with Richard. I think you may have sent did you send an email or a message to me already? I think that needs to happen. That Richard guy needs to get his comeuppance. Need a turbo for an 83 Dodge Shadow with a 4-speed 78-75. Yeah, that'll work. You're going to need another turbo to spool that one, or like 100 shot, but it'll work. It's possible to reach out and talk to you about tuning and setups. Do you mess with fuel tech computer systems? I don't. I've never used that, and I'm actually not a tuner. I do all of the wide open throttle stuff at Westech on my motors, not on anybody else's, because it's very, very easy. A wide open throttle setup on a turbo LS or Ford or Chevy, I mean, they're all the same. It's just I have a gauge telling me what the air fuel is, and then I make it what it needs to be. And then in timing, I know where the timing needs to be. And so in 5 or 6 pulls, I can have the wide open throttle stuff done very easily. What I'm not good at, only because I've never spent any time doing it, is getting the thing to work for idle and transition and driving and different gears, you know, all of the stuff that it really takes a tuner to do. So I'm not that guy. 15 PSI creeping past an 11 PSI gate. Yeah. Oh yeah, you were the one that commented on it. Those were fun. I liked arguing with myself. What engine is physically smaller? I'd take a guess and say the 4G63 is, but I haven't not measured them. 3576 on a single cam 4-liter inline 6-cylinder. That seems to be sized about right. I have all the factory Barra T stuff. I'm going to put on my Intech. Oh, the single overhead Barra. Okay. Injector and a charge pipe to cool the air. Yeah, how are you going to control the injector? Do you have an additional injector control or something? Or have you rigged something up? Would you recommend to pull timing out at once or pull 1 or 2 degrees per pound of boost? At 1 pound of boost, you don't need to pull a whole bunch of timing out, even at 2. So the way that it's normally set up in the table is we go from wide open throttle NA 98 or 100 kPa into whatever our first, and it depends on how we're scaling, whatever your next cell is. It depends on what the delineations are for how much boost you're running. If it's a 3-bar map sensor or a 4-bar map sensor, each cell might be 4 pounds. So you're going to take away a lot in that cell. But if you're running a 2-bar map sensor and you have a lot of resolution, the first cell might be 1 pound or 2 pounds. And so you can go, oh, well, if I was at 29 degrees at wide open throttle NA, maybe I'm going to go down to 27 or 26 and then start taking it away. And then the amount that you take away or what the shape of the curve was NA is going to mirror what's happening under boost. And so you're going to have less timing down low under boost. You're going to have less timing in the middle where the torque peak is. And then you're going to have more timing at the horsepower peak. How many silicone turbo hoses have you played with Flex Seal? I haven't done any with Flex Seal, but we've done it with other stuff. Lots with duct tape. You should have seen how many layers of duct tape I had this was actually on the inlet side of I ran a Vortex supercharger in the Mustang when I was running Bridgestone supercar because we were running a supercar, it had to have boost. So, but we were running that duct from the Vortex, which as you know is by the front of the motor, and we ran it all the way back into the cowl area to a hole that we had in the cowl area. So it was getting cowl induction, but it was also right above the headers. And when you're racing around like at Long Beach Grand Prix with not a lot of airflow, it gets hot in there. So it kept wanting to like melt the underside, but our cure was not to shield it or anything, was just to continue to wrap more tape around it. And so the thing started getting really pretty thick and pretty heavy. It makes a good blow through carburetor. We run CSU stuff. We've also run quick fuel stuff. Regarding the poll question, I've never seen a turbo curve lower than an NA curve. Duct tape and zip ties, that's right. Where are we at on our poll? 58% saying no. So you think that there's no power loss at all with driving the turbo? That's interesting. Sounds like timing is almost compensating for compression, converse, and inverse. For compression, we're not really changing compression, right? I think my timing curve had a maximum of 12 degrees at 14 pounds of boost. That would certainly be safe. So you think that you would lose some power going to the long tube header feeding a turbo? Calories in versus calories out for the next poll. So do we all have to go on a diet if I do that? audio's bad again? What's going on with my audio? It fixed itself? That's good. If I just give it the wiggle test. I know I'm even hardwired in because I can't use the speaking gray. It's all good. I am hardwired. Otherwise it wouldn't work. We tried to do that at the other house, and I tried doing it here too, and it would not work unless we had a, what kind of cable is that? Ethernet cable, maybe? Power loss, but under what condition? Full throttle. Well, it's under wide open throttle. Every car needs a little back pressure. Yeah, that's another common myth. Doing my first positive displacement build. Super excited to fire it up. 408 stroker with a 2650. 2650 is not an LSA blower, but are you using the LSA lower part with the intercooler and stuff? E4 will let you do a wiggle test. Yeah. What gauge pipe for crossover? I guess because 16 gauge is cracked and blown apart me 4 times. So something thicker than that. Schedule 10. That should not crack, although it's not going to have too much flex. On the crossover? Do you have a flex pipe, or do you have the ability for it to expand? I'm saying that not having that on my own on the engine dyno, although in a car I think it's probably different. James, how can you fit a 2650 rotor pack in an LSA case? The case shouldn't be long enough for that rotor pack. All right, Scott, I'll see you later, man. Do you print your junkyard engines or just run them with the assembly loop? I don't know what you mean by print. Oh, prime. That makes more sense. Normally we do, yeah. And our prime method is really simple. We fill it full of oil. We plug all of the vacuum lines and crankcase lines and stuff, and then we put an oil and filter in it, and we spin it over with the starter motor with no plugs in it, so it'll spin between 200 and 300 RPM depending. And we pressurize the crankcase. So we pressurize the crankcase and push oil basically up into the pickup. About 2 psi seems to do it pretty well, and then it immediately primes. And when we see oil pressure, because we have the oil line hooked up to our oil pressure gauge on the dyno, and we normally see 40 to 45 psi when we're cranking it. And once we start seeing that, then we're kind of happy. That's almost never a problem with junkyard motors unless it's broke. On new motors, that can become more of a problem. Could people be confusing back pressure with scavenging and testing that the motors make more power with a small length of exhaust on it? They certainly make more torque with a collector extension on it. And they could be thinking that back pressure, that it feels better or whatever. I don't know what their deal is, but yeah, back pressure is not something that you need. Bill, put a restriction on the intake side, vent it to atmosphere. That's not going to do anything. On a turbo motor, you need the boost blowing into the motor to create the exhaust flow. If you run ignition with a fast E6 digital CD box, isn't a fast ED digital CD box, isn't that like a Crane HI6? If that's the case, because I think that when they bought that company, I think that that's what that is. a CD ignition amplifier. And if it's like the HI6, I've run those a lot and they work very well. All right, Barry, we'll see you in the morning. Because I ever run 2 glass packs on one exhaust, one right behind the other. That should take more sting out of the exhaust. Richard calling performance to make a 2650 LSA. It doesn't look like any external difference. Maybe the rear of the case is extended. Yeah, I thought that the 2650 was quite a bit longer than because the LSA is only a 1.9 liter blower, the factory one. So that's considerably smaller than a 2650. And I don't think the growth is just this way, because that's how you determine, that's how you get displacement in a blower. You either make it bigger this way or you make it bigger this way. And I didn't think the 1.9 was as long as a 2650, but I am no LSA expert, that's for sure, having never run one. Richard, on your 6 liter, what was your exhaust housing size? I don't remember. The two 7875s were done with being twins in mind on these relatively smaller motors. But I honestly don't remember. I'd have to look it up. 572 Chevy. I have no idea. It would just be a speculation on my part to figure out what quarter-mile time that can run, especially with twin 76 millimeter turbos. Obviously, I don't know, blow through quad fuel injection, Victor Jr. I don't know what that is. Is it a 4-hole throttle body with injectors or something in it? T56 3. I don't know what the weight of the vehicle is. I'm not sure. We're sure how much traction you're going to have. 276 millimeter turbos is enough to go over 1,000 horsepower. So it makes enough power to run, you know, a pretty respectable quarter-mile. Crane boxes fail, stay MSD. That hasn't been the case with the stuff that I've done. MSDs definitely fail. That's why every race car, every cup car, every Trans Am car I've ever seen, they always have 2 of them, and they have a switch to toggle from one to the other in case one fails during racing. I've never broken a crane one. Factory big block truck exhaust is 3 inches. That big enough for a rear mount setup for a hot side? Thinking of cutting and splicing in the factory pipe. Yeah, that will work fine. Snafu's out. Recently changed the side of my blow-off valve line, 3/8 to 1/4, and I'm hearing turbo flutter now. The boost reference line going to the blow-off valve? What size is the fitting? What size is the fitting on the blow-off valve? 3/8 seems like it's awful big to me. Well, I have to vacuum up the blow-off valve. It's just slower now. It's slower now with the smaller line? Is the line being sucked shut? Ben's late. So we're going to close out our poll with 58% saying no. There is apparently, is there a power loss associated with driving a turbo? So the consensus is that no, there is not. Although 58 to 42, it's not an overwhelming consensus. So we'll end our poll there. Terry, there would definitely be a volume change, but I don't know how that should affect the signal, though. So you're still on the Kathy Lee thing? Dan, you seem to be taking this personally. No, nobody is saying that turbos don't work. We're just asking if there is power associated with all of the extra power that you get from the turbo. Is there power required to drive the turbo? That's the question. And it's funny how people take things personally. What's your go-to fuel and ignition control system for an LS? What I run on the engine dyno is are the things that I know how to tune because I've been using them for years and years. If it's a Holley HP or a Holley Dominator, I've also done the fast XFI stuff, although we haven't used that for a while. And then most recently, the MS3 Pro, although Eric did most of that testing. He's just showing me now what are the things what buttons I need to click to change things. It's only air fuel and timing, and now with the MS3 Pro, cam timing as well. Got a 6-liter today and an Escalade for $600, cheaper than just the engine already pulled. Nice. And the go-to fuel, oh, an ignition control system. Okay, I thought you were asking about what fuel I use. Six liters are always good. I might have access to a 6-liter, which would be interesting because I want to redo the low-speed torque buildup with a 6-liter again. I think that needs to happen. So Ben, you're going to sell it to somebody, some lucky person, for $600? Would you ever put your Chevy on a chassis dyno just to see what it puts to the pay? Are you talking about mine? Mine's been on the dyno a lot. My stock truck has been. It's been on there a bunch. It's even got a tune, or it had a tune. Maybe they tuned it. I don't remember. Turbo with 0% loss would be like perpetual free energy generation. It would be the perpetual motion machine, right? And as far as I know, we haven't found that yet. I'd like to see some Ford 6.2-liter testing. There's a couple guys here that want to see that. Could you not just run the engine with no charge pipe, then with no turbo to see what the difference is? But we don't have exhaust back pressure. What air-fuel ratio is good on E85? We always run an 11.5 to 1 on the gas scale. I own a 5.3 Silverado, so I can joke. I know. 200 pounds. That's pretty heavy, but you have more than enough power to play with. You're still going to be dealing with traction problem. I'm thinking that if I remember right, I wonder if I have that. I'm going to check my dyno results and see if I have that. Let's see. I'm going to have to close this out. I don't know if I can't remember if I have that data or not. My documents, dyno results, LS. LS Cathedral port, 5.3. Nope, I don't see it there. I'm thinking it was like in the 240 or 250 range or something. I'll have it for tomorrow. I'll try to have it for tomorrow. I'll see if Isher or Eric can get it for me if I don't have it somewhere. Why do you run E85 on the gas scale? Because that's how our meter is done. I will not be doing any more. I like this. I will not be doing any more testing of Twizzlers. I had them twice, and they're a kind of sorry tasting candy. I'm not a fan of Twizzlers. I think Red Vines are far superior. My wife likes Twizzlers, and so do my kids. But for me, Red Vines are one of the quintessential things that you have when you go to a movie theater. That's like the thing that you get. You get popcorn and a drink, and you get Twizzlers. For me, that's movie candy. Or Red Vines and not Twizzlers. So I like those a lot better. And I also like black licorice Red Vines. Yeah, Karen, I think that's the range that this truck was in. Fast XFI Sportsman is a good system. I haven't run fast for a long time, so I don't know how good they are anymore. Let's see, Richard, did you hear about the new Coyote intakes, Gen 2 Cobra Jet? Yeah, I think we've run testing on those already. Red Vine guys rise up. East Coast Red Vine, I like to see that. East Coast, yo. Ben, that's true. Twizzlers are like tires, I agree, but then you eat one, you have to finish them all. That's the thing about a package is a single serving. So whatever size package that is, that's definitely a single serving. Take my Turbo LS Terminator X build on his first road trip. So we can have some mountains to drive through. What can I expect to see when I get into less than 100 kPa range? About 100 kPa should be wide open throttle, right? So you want to know what to expect when you're cruising? Oh, those intakes were announced less than 2 weeks ago. Okay, I thought they were talking about the Cobra Jet intake and the late model intake. I think we've tested all of those. The blue Willy Wallaby licorice. I'm gonna have to learn about that. Maybe he's concerned about the altitude. Oh, but unless you have a big change in timing for what's going to be a minimal change, altitude is going to be a minimal change in kPa, I would think. It's not going to be more than 10 kPa, probably. Masagua. Yes. The spelling is interesting, but yeah, those are one of the rattlesnake family. They actually had those in Ohio. I didn't find any when I was there, though. 2 more minutes. Yeah, I don't think we see 100 kPa completely at West Tech, and some of it might be the sensors that we're using. I think we're more like 98 or 99 maybe. Or if you pay what they want to go to the movies, it is expensive. I was talking about back in the day, man. It's a good head to run on a Gen 6 454 with plus 20 cc pistons. Lucky for you, I have lots of videos up on head swaps that we've done. The Airflow Research 265 heads are really good for that. Fire sticks, James, that's good. I do like going to the movies though. I think some things you have to see in the movies. For instance, the first Avengers movie was really good. That was amazing in the movie theater. Things like Star Wars, Jaws was amazing. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Road Warriors, yep. California Kid, Dune. Now we're just throwing stuff out there. King Kong. Actually, King Kong versus Godzilla. I'm a big fan of that. And King Kong Skull Island. I thought both of those were good. So is it RPM or torque? It's cylinder pressure, I think, that bends the rods. Blazing Saddles, heavy metal. If you like Fire Stick, Fire Cube is even better. I haven't tried one of those. I'd like to. We have, you know, big expensive box. Have you ever used a Fight Tick? No, I haven't. Jurassic Park was definitely good in the movie theater. Mothra, I know, just not that scary. Who's gonna get the last question? Time to go. I got stuff to do. Ooh, Pacific Rim, that was another good one. I had to explain to my kids why they called them Jaegers and how cool of a person Chuck Yeager was, that none of us could ever be like Chuck Yeager cool. I guess, I don't know if they've seen, maybe we need to sit down and watch, but even, well, it does kind of do it. The Right Stuff. They need to see The Right Stuff. X15, yes. Last Indian's also good. I knew Chuck. I was his gunsmith. Oh, that's cool. Used cars, good. Kurt Russell. Somebody mentioned Jaeger meaning hunter. Maybe that's true. That's not what I told them. You ever test an aluminum rod versus steel rod? Nope. I've never run aluminum rods in any motor I've ever built. I'm not that cool. I'm not aluminum rod cool. Have you read? Are you talking about the movie Red? Which is awesome with Bruce Willis. And I love Helen Mirren, she's the most awesomeness. Yeah, Jaeger is hunter in German. That's right. Just like Vader is father in German, which I didn't know until I saw the movie Pitch Perfect. I can't believe I went all those years without knowing that. But I thought it was an homage to Chuck Yeager, who was the ultimate pilot. I did see the Steve Morris thing. He's a real engine builder. He doesn't do what I do. He does real stuff. I went to see Pitch Perfect just for the tagline, just prepare to be pitch slapped, which I thought was one of the greatest taglines of all. And so I went to see it just for that. And I went to see it by myself when I was down at West Tech Performance. And I came back and I told my wife, I said, we have to go see this movie. You will love this. Real Steel was also good. My kids loved it. James, that's from Pacific Rim. Real Steel was awesome. It's a good. It's Rocky basically, but with robots. I just got back from the Reno air races. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm glad that I wasn't there when they had the jet crash, but I got to see lots of cool stuff. I'm not a real aviation guy, but I do love, there's lots of cool stuff out there. P-51s are awesome. My favorite plane of all time is an SR-71. A stock 400 small block with a 671 blower and stock rods. How much would you think? I would start at 7 pounds. The A-10s are awesome. I mean, there's lots of really cool stuff. And on that note, it is time to go. We can talk more about this in the morning if you guys are here in the morning, and then we can talk about it again tomorrow night. Please, if you haven't watched it, go watch the video that I put up on the turbo stuff. We'll have to see how that one's doing. Pacific Rim was a ripoff of the Japanese. That's Godzilla. All of those movies are ripoff of cool Japanese things. The Magnificent Seven, the Seven Samurai. Just look, it's all there for you. Thank you guys, and I will see you all tomorrow. And